Good afternoon. I'm Dominic Frandrup, Director of the Door County Public Libraries. I want to thank you all for joining us here today for Ben's presentation, Rethinking Education. And I want to remind everyone who is on Zoom to please remain muted. And you can use your chat feature to ask any questions you may have. We'll be taking those as they come in. For those of you in the audience, please have your cell phones muted and keep in mind that we are being recorded. This morning, I would like to introduce Christina Johnson, our branch manager for Sister Bay Liberty Grove, with our land acknowledgement.
The Door County Reads Committee acknowledges the original peoples and primary caretakers of this peninsula from time immemorial, the Potawatomi, Menominee, Ho-Chunk, Odawa, Ojibwe, Petun, Huron, and Sauk peoples. The land we stand on today is part of the ancestral and historical homelands of each of these nations. We pay respect to these roots and connections and the traditional ecological knowledge that is present and vital today. May we appreciate those who came before us and commit to partnering with and learning from First Nations today and into the future. We are honored to share this time together. We would also like to acknowledge our funders. This event is funded in part by a grant from the Wisconsin Humanities with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the state of Wisconsin. And any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this project do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Rethinking Education and Menominee Traditional Games Workshop today is with Ben and Lucy Greeno, and it's in conjunction with this year's Door County Reads book, Reading Sweetgrass for Young Adults. We have copies at our public libraries for checkout, and there may be some gift copies available still if people are interested at some of our branches. I know we have some at my branch up in Sister Bay. I would like to introduce our speakers today and a little bit about what they're talking about. Walking away, Benjamin Greeno is here to be talked, and he is a traditional arts instructor at the Menominee Indian High School, represents the Menominee Nation and approaches culturally responsive education by using Menominee language, culture, and art to promote and preserve tribal history as a pathway for future generations and positively influence the education of the youth in his community. He is the recipient of the 2019 Wisconsin High School Teacher of the Year and 2019 Wisconsin Education Association Council Award for Teaching Excellence, as well as the 2020 National Education Association's Leo Riano Memorial Human and Civil Rights Award. And if that's not enough, also the 2022 First Peoples Fund, We the Peoples Before Education Fellow. Lucy Greeno is also here today, and she is an enrolled member of the Stockbridge Munsee Band of Mohican Nation and a direct descendant of the Menominee Nation. Mohiknuk being of the people of the waters that are never still, and Menominee being of the ancient movers. She is a passionate Indigenous homesteader, educator, doula, and advocate for her community and the world around her. Lucille's family owns an Indigenous homestead called Ancient Roots in Bowler, Wisconsin. And that's their homestead that we were listening to a presentation on last night at the Crest Center. We will have that video up at some point if people are interested in hearing that one. They did present at the Door Community Auditorium a couple of years ago in March of 2022. So if you recognize their names and their faces, that might be why. Just want to describe their talk a little bit today. As teachers in the public school system, Lucy and Ben have experienced district initiatives that have sometimes worked, but mostly failed to be implemented and sustained. After years of success in the public school system, each of these educators chose a different path, both within and outside of their schools, to address the observed needs in their community. This discussion today will focus on how each of these educators have changed their educational practices, philosophies, to create initiatives that are rooted in their traditional educational ways of being to serve their students, communities, ancestors, and future educational methodologies. After the talk, we will have some hands-on workshops for those of you that are here, traditional Menominee games with Ben, as well as making our own storytelling beaded bracelets. So, Ben, take it away.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so Mauni Wiak, walking away in that Akayan, Ben Greeno and that the Weiss one. I wanted to thank you all for being here this morning. I know it's a cold Sunday morning. Thank my family for coming up from Green Bay. Really appreciate seeing you all here, especially you, Teddy. And it's really good to reconnect with a lot of friends and family from up here in the Door Peninsula. And last night was pretty amazing. Hearing Lucy speak. I've heard her speak quite a few times. You know, just being a supportive husband. But there's always something that clicks in these new. Once we speak about these things a little bit more and a little bit more, we understand it a little bit better. And I think that's kind of what we're going to be speaking about today. So I'm a traditional arts teacher at the Menominee Indian High School in Kashina, Wisconsin. I've been teaching. I've been with the district since 2008, so quite a few years, and I've learned quite a few things along the way. No. Click, click, click. All right, here we go. Got it. So, in my educational journey, I went to a lot of different schools. It took me 12 years to finish my bachelor's degree. Not because I was lazy um, or just not doing what I was supposed to do. I approached my education in a different way. There's a lot of things that I wanted to learn about, and one school wasn't going to cut it for me. I wanted, I did blacksmithing at Santa Fe Community College. I did artistic welding at another school. I did two-dimensional design and three-dimensional design at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I studied ceramics and non-static forms or installation art at University of Wisconsin in Green Bay, or University of Wisconsin, Madison. I got my teaching certification from, let's see, Concordia. I'm still working on my doctorate in First Nations education at UWGB. So like my educational journey has been far reaching. And it's been really has really shaped who I am and the way I think about education and approaching education. So I'm from the Menominee Nation. These are my ancestors. This is my ancestral work. When I was asked to be a traditional arts teacher at our school, I knew some things, but I really wanted to learn a lot more. And so because I was, I also went to the University of Arizona and got my library and archival degree, master's degree there. I was familiar with archives and like getting into the archives and finding the things that I wanted to find. And so I did that. I went to different archives around the country. Luckily, my brother Marcus brought me to the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Spent some time at the National Museum of the American Indian in DC. Did some stuff at the Field Museum in Chicago. And hi, baby, come on over. We have a multi-generational audience here today. So this is my daughter, Kashipiti Yaman. This means wild rose. And bye, mama. You want to say bye, daddy? Okay. So I had to find the things that I needed because a lot of the arts that I was interested in, there were very few people that were still practicing them. So we had to look and search and seek out and be inspired by the arts of our people through a lot of these archives, and through some of the elders that still practiced on my reservation and in other reservations as well. So, are you ready for a story? Yeah, this one your favorite? Yeah, the tree. Yeah, okay. So I wanted to share a story with you all. Ready? Say it to me. Okay. So a long time ago, I'm gonna have a hard time saying this one with her in my hands. This is a story that was told by a man named Johnny Moses. And when he described the story, he said that it was originated in his homelands, which are way up in Canada, and that the women in his tribe, when they would marry off into other tribes, they would carry stories with them, and so that's how these stories moved, and so that as these stories moved into other nations, they were adopted in as their own stories and changed. And so when he told the story, he told it a certain way. Now that I've kind of created it or made it into my own, I've also changed the way that this story is told. Oh yeah, Teddy's having some juice. You want to go see what he's doing? Yeah, okay. So as the story was incorporated into our culture, um, I've added some things and I've changed a few things, but the heart of the story is still the same. When we look at some of the stories that have been written down in archival, in archives, in books, in ethnographies, the stories are like a little snapshot, right? You read them and it's just like, well, it says that in our tales that these stories were told for multiple days, multiple nights in the wintertime. And then when you read these stories and they're just little pieces. And it was the responsibility of the storyteller to like build on that and to engage with the community in their own specific needs. Some of the older teachers in Menominee, it was an older man that would go from village to village and he would spend time in the wintertime with different families and tell the stories. And I imagine that the conversation would go, he would meet with the family and see what the needs were of the family, and it would inform the way that he would tell the story or which stories to choose that would be most impactful for that family at that time. So this story I've changed a little bit from Johnny Moses, but I keep the heart of the story the same. So a long time ago, there was this giant pine tree, grandmother pine, and she was the matriarch of the forest around her. She knew all the plants, knew all the animals. She was responsible for so many things. She had so much knowledge, and she just loved her forest. And this grandmother and her grandchild were walking along, and this grandchild, when little kids are walking in the forest, they stop and they look and they seek around and they find things, and that's really suited to elderly people. It's why we always pair the elderly people with the young ones, because they could go a little bit, stop and rest, go a little bit, stop and rest. So this little girl, this little granddaughter, saw this pine cone and she was just enamored with it. She picked it up and she was moving it around, staring at it. And she said, "Grandma, what's this?" Right? "Grandma, what's this?" And Grandma said, "Well, it's a pine cone. It's a seed that turns into this giant pine tree." Yeah. Yeah. Great big pine tree. And Grandma said, "You can carry it. You can be the seed keeper of that one." So this little one took care of this pine cone and carried it with her. And as they walked down the forest, they walked through the forest. This little one carried this one like a little child. And they got further and further along, and they kept walking. And meanwhile, Grandmother Pine, she knew that there was something happening way off in the distance. She could hear like the plants communicating danger. And today we call that like a mycelial network. And um, um, and so she knew that there was something coming, a great fire, a forest fire. So she reached down into the earth with her roots, and she pulled up water and saturated herself, pulled up as much water as she could to protect her from the forest fire. And she was telling the other ones to do that too, but their roots weren't as deep as hers. And so as that forest fire came, it kind of wiped out everything around her. And she was okay. She had a little bit of burnt skin, but she was all right because she was able to saturate herself. Yeah. And that was a very sad time for her. But grandma and that little one were also walking in the woods, and grandma heard something, and she could sense something, she could smell something in the air, and she could smell that smoke drifting across through the woods, and she knew, it was a time of the forest fires, the moon that all these forest fires occur in. And she told her granddaughter that they had to run. So they ran. And that little one is carrying that little seedling, that little pine cone with her. And they get to this little small lake, or like a large pond. And grandma said, take off all your clothes. And they buried them in the sand. And they got into the water. And soon the animals of the forest started running towards them. And some of the bigger animals jumped into the water as well. So they were in the pond with deer and bear, and some of the little animals, they couldn't make it. Soon that fire came, and they had to dive under the water. And that little girl looked around under the water and saw these bear and these deer, which the bears, normally you'd be kind of afraid of. But she saw that those bear were just as afraid as she was. Yeah. And that fire leaped over that pond and kept going. And so grandma got them out of the water, and all the animals started running off into the forest, or what was left of the forest. And she saw that the ground was still covered with ashes. And so they spent the night there. They pulled their clothes up out of the sand, and they slept there and waited for everything to kind of calm down. And the next day they started walking back. They wanted to see what happened to their village, make sure everything was okay. And grandmother Pine was there standing tall, just like this one right here. Yeah. And she was weeping. She was sad. So grandma told that granddaughter to plant that pine cone next to it. And they left. And they walked away, and days, weeks later, a little sprout came up out of the earth. Grandmother Pine looked down and called it grandchild. And that little one, she knew she had to protect it. She knew she had to pass on all of her knowledge onto that little one. So she reached down with her roots, and she pulled water up and showed that one how to feed itself with the water. And that little one, he grew up a little bit taller, a little bit stronger, a little bit wider. Branches grew out a little bit further. Yeah. Yeah. And when he was safe, and he felt safe, and he felt loved, grandma imparted that wisdom on what they needed to survive. She started educating that little one. And when the sun was beating down on that little one, and he felt like his leaves were going to burn up, she sheltered him with her branches. And he felt safe again, felt loved, he felt good, and all of his needs were taken care of. And she started teaching him about the sun and how important the sun is. And when the animals started coming back, when things started growing again, that little one saw the deer were coming and chewing on the plants. So that little one got scared. And grandma, she put her branches together, knocked her branches together, and scared those deer off. And that little one felt safe again, felt strong. And his branches grew a little bit wider. He grew a little bit taller. Roots grew a little bit deeper. And he was able to understand and learn about the different animals of the forest from grandma. And when that little one started feeling sad, grandma called to the birds, and the little songbirds came and lighted on the branches of grandma and started singing their songs. And they brought seeds too. And they shared the seeds with the forest around them, and the little plants started growing. And that little one felt better. So he grew a little bit taller, a little bit stronger. Branches grew a little bit wider, roots grew a little bit deeper. And that little one learned about all the different kinds of songbirds and birds in the forest. And this went on and on, year after year. When that little one felt safe and secure, grandmother would start teaching. He learned so much, right? And he grew tall. He grew tall like grandma, even taller than grandma. And grandma said she realized that her time was getting near, where she was gonna die and fall down. She told grandson this.
Fall down?
Mm-hmm. And grandson said,
The butt, the button.
yeah. Said, don't worry, grandma. I'll be the one to bring the water up. My roots are deep. I'll bring the water up for us to drink. And when that sun's beating down on you and it feels like your branches are or your leaves are gonna burn up, I'll be the one to shade you. And when that wind comes out of the north, blowing hard like it does today, I'll be the one to hold you. And so, this is a story that we can all relate to, right? We can all understand this kind of a story. I've expanded this story from what Johnny Moses had told. And I've created a way, I've implemented other stories from Menominee into that story itself. And it has really informed how I approach teaching. Our kids, they come from homes that may have trauma. They come from, they may be homeless. They may, there's a whole variety of situations which our kids are dealing with that we have no idea what's going on in their own lives. As teachers, we get a little bit of insight into that. And well, I think it's really our responsibility to nurture them, to make sure that they're safe, that they feel loved, that they have something to eat, that they have a place to sleep if they need to. That my classroom is a safe place for them, so that they are able to grow, like in that story. So these are a few of my students doing work. It's really amazing to see like them connect with basket weaving, with beading, with the design work of our people, looking at colors, looking at how things are made, how things are shaped. And this is really amazing. It's really amazing work. But I think that, coming from a place where I learned how to teach from a college in a cookie cutter way, I learned my classroom management. This is how you manage a classroom. This is your philosophy of education. These are the Vygotsky and all these guys that had these specific philosophies of education, and this is important. And so I leapt into my classroom thinking this way, thinking that these are the ways that I'm supposed to teach. And so I had these projects, and they were graded, and I used these grades to make sure they were on track. And if they were failing, then one of the principal philosophies of doing work like this, doing traditional arts like this, is that you do it with a good mind, right? And how can a student do it with a good mind with like thinking that they're going to be getting a failing grade for the work that they're doing or not doing? So this guy right here, I called him Squanto. When I first started, I asked when I first started, I asked the kids if they had Menominee names, and he told me his name was Squanto. He was a kidder, and he hated doing the project I had assigned. Hated it. He didn't even want to do it. Like I couldn't reach him, but he was a fun kid. You know, like we talked and like we enjoyed conversations together, and I really connected with him. And all the other kids were doing the project I assigned the way I was telling them to do it, and he was just like, no. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? So, well, I want to carve a lacrosse stick. I'm like, all right. So I built a carving bench, and I put him in a room where he could experiment and do that. And it worked. Like he was doing, like coming in outside of class time to do his work. Like, wow, this is really cool. This is really cool. Like just giving them a little bit of freedom, giving them a little bit of choice, changed the whole dynamic of my classroom. And so that's what I did. I started changing how I approach everything. So pandemic came, kind of stopped, right? And I had the opportunity to, I mean, I was at working from home. It's really hard to teach art over a Zoom. I made it work. You know, I made little kits to send home, and we made it happen. But an opportunity arose, which was near and dear to my own heart, to create a charter school based on Menominee language immersion. And so I applied for it, and I got the job. And so the name of the school is Kakina Wapatat. And I had a lot of freedom from the board, from the governance board, to build the program in the way that would be important to us as Menominee people. So I started like delving into what is Menominee education. I mean, I come from a background of education, but I was taught in a Western school. So looking at like at the story that I just shared with you, looking at all these different things that you know that like our mother, my mom Linda Greeno, she's been an educator forever, and I like grew up like going up to Washington Island with her in the summers to do art programs, and seeing like a different way of approaching it. So I had this background of education from my family, from my culture, and so I wanted to also look at like what's in the archives, what's in the libraries. What do our elders know about how we were educated pre-contact? And the governance board had already set in motion this in their grant application to become a charter school, figuring out what's the oldest form of knowledge way we would pass on knowledge. And within that, we did Achimon, which is storytelling, and Kakena Wapatat, which is learning through observation. It's the way that we learned a lot of our like traditional medicines, you know, watching the animals of the forest, specifically the bear, right? The bear, you can go out in the woods and find the medicines that they need to heal themselves with. And we watched that, we saw that, we observed different things in nature, and we have this whole, there's a book written of Menominee predictors, that if, you know, if this happens, then you can expect this. It's really amazing. The knowledge that was kept for us to rediscover. And and so that's what we did. We built the program around what that would look like. So Kakena Wapatat Learning Community nurtures Menominee ways of being through holistic child-centered education. That's how we are moving forward. And the way that we did that is that we looked at our 13 moon seasonal calendar. I found in Washington, D.C., in the archives there, a document by C.C. Trowbridge from 1823, which is the earliest accounting of our 13 moons that I have found yet. And so we're basing it based on that, the earliest accounting of that. So the moons that we have, oh yeah, that's like a moon too, isn't it? Yeah.
Daddy.
Yeah, we don't eat that one. So I have an example here. Maybe I can pull it up. Is that okay if I do it with Google Chrome? Yeah? Okay. So this is sequin queso, which is coming up soon. Is that so? Okay.
Yeah, I can.
So for each month, each moon cycle is something that happens within our Menominee community. There are certain things that that we've observed. In the forest, what's going on in the forest. There are things that we can pull out from the actual name of the moon itself. The moon of the poor game. So taking all this information, putting it all into one place, setting out a kind of a loose curriculum that we could build this program on. And Teddy, who's in the audience today, goes to this school, and he's somewhere around. He's walking around, but we really wanted to find a way to address how we would traditionally teach, also teach in the language, and also teach in Montessori. So we had a big ask. These are the predictors I was telling you about. So during the spring, when the snow is busy melting, you should put down some tobacco. Say, all right, I'll be here when you come back when the fall has come. It's one of the things that we would do. And so we wanted to make sure that our teachers, our Montessori guides, had access to as much information from all of these different sources that they could for building their program. All right, can I move back to just X out of this? Ooh. Escape.
Just move that box to the upper right. Minimize.
Yeah, the bar keeps going up.
There we go. All right.
All right.
Thank you. Sorry. I teach the arts, not the. Huh. It's both, right?
Just click on one. And then go to hide clothing.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you so much. So I created this little digital representation of the 13 moons on Turtle's back, which everybody should be pretty familiar with. But I wanted to make sure that we put our names in there and put them in a way that that our people would understand. within our clan system as well. A lot of the clan duties, we have 5 principal clans of the Menominee, but pretty much every animal of the forest, animal, bird, fish, was represented in a clan system way back in the day. And each one had a specific duty, a specific job to do during that time. So during the maple sugaring season, which we're all looking forward to, these are the clans that would be primarily have different jobs within maple sugaring that they would perform. And these are clan statues that were carved by a Menominee, and they are currently on display at the Oshkosh Public Museum, which is an amazing display. If you ever get a chance, go check it out. So not only are we doing Menominee education, we're also doing Montessori. And because when we looked at how we would educate as Menominee people, Montessori was pretty darn close. So that's what we did. We wanted to find something that would mesh well, that we could, while we're building our reconnecting with our Menominee educational model, we could also use this other model, which is already established, which follows the child and in their needs. We are looking at identifying strengths of our children and then building a program that they, like, if Teddy is really interested in dancing, which I know he is, he really gives her out on the powwow ring. What can we do to encourage that and to build on that within the Kakena Wapatat model? That can we bring in a community member that is really good at dancing that can help mentor Teddy as he builds on his dancing? So school opens. This is the very first day. It was very tough. That, like, our first few months I was so stressed out. And it was hard. I mean, building a school is hard. Reconnecting with your culture is hard. Bringing in different models from Italy is hard. So all these things, like we had this building, we had a renovated building. First week of school, all the plumbing stops and bathrooms aren't working, and so like all these things, we have like all these different obstacles, but we pulled through, right? We pulled through. We made it, and the community pulled through. They came in. We had elders working on dish bags for the kids. We have our museum, our culture museum in Menominee, which brought the kids in to show them the different objects and, like, how do you use a winnowing basket? The kids created their own forest classroom behind the school. And so they were out there with their little bitty, like, in Montessori, we have these, like, they do their own little sweeping, these like daily tasks, practical life tasks that they begin with. And so these kids were out there with their little rakes, raking the leaves, digging holes, just being kids in the forest, learning. In the fall, it's also our wild ricing time. And we can't really these are pre-K kids. We can't bring them out on the lake to go rice, but what can we do? So we have this old dilapidated holy canoe, and the kids brought it out into the forest and set it up as like a mock ricing, which we learned from an Ojibwe relative that works in immersion education. That's what they did. And so we wanted to bring that into ours because we're wild rice people, right? And we also have our language and culture commission, which was doing the processing of the rice. And the kids were like, this is also right behind the school. So the kids just walked over and joined in with what was going on there. And so they were able to pretty much do everything except be out on the water. They'll graduate towards that, year after year, we'll build on that. but they're really good at the separating rice. It's amazing, amazing. One day there was like a bag full of rice that had partially partially had the stalk or the stalk the chaff on it. And the next day I looked and there was like a big thing of rice ready to go. I was like, wow, these kids are awesome. And so then, you know, as we moved on in the year, we had Otachia come in and talk about harvesting deer, and created this little diagram with the different names of the parts of the deer of the Menominee, and kids had hands-on experience tanning a hide. This is in our little greenhouse, little hoop house, which was heated, which was really nice. But you know, like digging in the dirt with a deer hoof was pretty amazing. That kid is awesome. Meanwhile, I'm looking at these different, they're called nomenclature cards. It's Montessori model, and revisioning them in Menominee. So the weather words I took and found tree bark, so like we could do tree identification, name of the Menominee tree, what the leaf looks like, what the bark looks like, what does the life cycle of a tree, what are the different parts of the tree, animal terms, fruits, all these different things. They're, you know, like in Montessori and English, you can just like go by all of these things, but we're in a Menominee immersion model school. We have to make everything. Everything needs to be made. And so the kids took these nomenclature cards, and our Menominee conservation officer came in, brought in hides, and they were able to identify, use those cards to identify the different kinds of animals based on hides that were brought in. And they did a lot of cooking. My wife Lucy came in, and we did a lot of cooking with the kids. It was really cool. It was super cool, super fun, amazing. Kids are doing all kinds of things, all in the language, making snacks, making little wassa sandwiches there out of peanut butter and blueberries and bananas. One of the coolest things, though, I think that came out of this is like how our teachers are working together with our administration. That is Tara. She is the principal of the school. That's Tracy. She is a paraprofessional, a teacher's aide. And then we have another teacher in there. I don't think, maybe she's the one that's taking the picture. But all three of them are working on a math lesson. Tara was doing in English, teacher was doing in Menominee, and Tracy was, I can't remember what Tracy was doing, but it needed all three of them to work together in order for this to happen. We got Teddy over here. I made some posters of different kinds of actions that are happening in the school. Teddy's embarrassed. And Tatakasan too, he's really good at writing. So we wanted to make sure that we put a Sasha cow with Tatakasan doing his writing. You know, we bought snowshoes for the kids. We brought the kids over to one of the teachers' homes to do maple sugar processing. In Montessori, they have mats that they roll out and that they do their projects on. One of the teachers said that, hey, why don't we do it on deer hides? So we got a bunch of deer hides to roll up instead of mats. And so that's what they do. They do their projects on those deer hides, their math projects, you know, geography, all these different things are happening. Oh, went too far. That's okay. So if I like in the middle of all of this, I see this this thing on Facebook from Chief Ladybird, and she made this this graphic. It says we have to be the muskrat in a new creation story. So in rethinking how we approach education, we're really building something brand new. We're actually doing creation itself, and that's really what we need to do. Western style education just isn't working for us. We need something that we can change, that we can call our own, that we can reach into our hearts, into our ancestry, into our genetic memory, and connect with. So school's up and running. I take position as a language and culture coordinator for the district. So I could work in each of the schools and help out with that. That worked for about a year. And then within our school district, we lost one of our language teachers. So the teacher that had taken over my classroom, the traditional arts classroom, moved into the language room, and I volunteered to move back into the traditional arts classroom because that is where my heart is. That's where my connections are. That's where I feel I can have the most impact on my community, is in this art classroom. So I came back in and created it, made it my own. And so now I have it, like, because of all these different things that happened within my life, within my educational journey, all these different influences, all these different pedagogies that I've experienced, I again changed how I approach the arts in our traditional Menominee classroom. And so I've created this space where it's more like an open lab, an open art studio. And it's been a very difficult thing to move from, this is the project, this is your grade, done. Now I'm like, well, what do you want to learn? What do you want to do? What are you interested in? What are the things that that you've seen that you like, oh yeah, I want to try that. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's shed some of that that need for grades, that need for approaching things in a very regimented way. And now let's open it up to, let's explore. Let's find out what's cool. And so I've been bringing in artists from the community, former students, and they don't come in and teach, they come in and work. And the kids are able to, like, just ask questions. Like, this is a tattoo artist. He does tattoos, and he's a professional artist. One of my former students, he does tattoos in Green Bay. Leah came in and was working on hand woven, finger woven belts. She's also part of the doula program. So she was really connecting with the young ladies in our classroom and getting them to kind of like step out of their own shells too. It's hard for me as a teacher to do it, but it's also hard for the kids who have been indoctrinated in it. Like, what is my grade? What do I need to get a good grade in this class? I'm almost done. And so again, like connecting these kids to projects that interest them. The product itself isn't important. It's the look on their faces when they've connected, when they've felt something true to their spirit, to something that they can pass on one day when I'm gone. So I think that's it. Oh, I have a short video. Can we do a video? Is that okay? All right. Maybe I'll just talk over it. Oh, okay, I can hear it on the screen. All right, well, you guys can't hear. So one of the things that we're approaching now is looking at how do we take our traditional arts and move it into other classrooms. So I've collected all of these examples of different loom beadwork, belts, geometric patterns from different archives around the country, like I explained before. And I'm having the kids replicate that on both on graphing paper, but also on iPads. And so you can see here, the work is on iPads. I did a picture by picture thing on the iPad to make this graphic. Yeah. And so the kids have little Apple pencils, you know, and they just hit the dot and it fills for them. And they can recreate the designs of our people on these and then start creating their own. But when looking at all of these designs, we're seeing the mathematics behind it, where we're building on that. And so now we're looking at how can we take this process of design work and move it into the geometry classroom? Can we explain Pythagorean theorem to our kids using beaded design or loom work itself? Can we do reflections over a line? There's all these different things that we can do using our traditional arts. Ideal, right? It's like the way that I think that we move forward at the high school level. And it's just I just love doing what I do. And the possibilities of moving forward within this artistic endeavor, moving the arts into everything. Instead of keeping me in my one little classroom, let's take this classroom into other areas within our schools. All right. I think that's it. No, that's not it. All right. The last thing. This is the last thing. These are the elders that made it happen. These are the ones that took it upon themselves to not only speak the language, but to pass the language on through education. You know, we couldn't do what we're doing now without them. Each of these photos is on display at our school. So all these smiling elders are looking at our kids every day. They walk down the hall and these ones are there watching over them. And that's a powerful thing. It's a powerful thing for us. And the legacy of these amazing educators. And I just want to thank you all for listening, for attending.